God made the first man. His name was Adam. God formed Adam carefully from the dust of the ground. Then God breathed his own breath, the breath of life, into Adam's nostrils. At that moment, Adam became a living person. He was very special because God made him in his own image. This meant Adam could think deeply, he could love, and he could make choices. He was the very first human being to walk on the earth. God saw that Adam was alone in the world he had created. God lovingly said, "It is not good for the man to be alone." So God decided to make a perfect helper, a companion for Adam. While Adam was in a deep sleep, God took one of Adam's ribs. From this rib, God skillfully made a woman. Her name was Eve. When Adam woke up and saw Eve, he was very happy. He knew they were made for each other, a special pair. Adam and Eve lived together in a truly wonderful place. This place was called the Garden of Eden. It was their perfect first home, designed by God. In this garden, they had no need for clothes, yet they felt no shame at all. They were completely innocent and pure in their hearts and minds. They enjoyed a close relationship with God. They would often walk and talk with God in the cool part of the day. Their life was filled with pure joy and unbroken peace. They had everything they could ever need. The Garden of Eden was a true paradise on earth. God himself planted this beautiful garden especially for Adam and Eve. It was full of all kinds of lovely trees. These trees grew many types of delicious fruit ready to eat. Clear, sparkling rivers flowed gently through the garden. These rivers watered all the plants and kept the garden green. Many different animals lived peacefully together in Eden. It was a place of incredible beauty, wonder, and perfect order. Everything was fresh, new, and good. The Garden of Eden was truly an amazing and breathtaking place. Imagine flowers of every possible color blooming brightly everywhere you looked. The air itself smelled sweet and fragrant, filled with the perfume of these blossoms. Juicy, ripe fruits hung invitingly from the strong branches of the trees. Beautiful birds sang sweet and melodious songs all through the day. Gentle, friendly animals played together without any fear. In Eden, there was no sickness to cause pain, no sadness to bring tears, and no fear to make one anxious. It was a place of complete happiness and perfect harmony with God and all of creation. In the very middle of this wonderful garden, God had placed two very special trees. One of these important trees was called the Tree of Life. If someone ate the fruit from this particular tree, they would be able to live forever. This tree was a powerful symbol of God's own unending life and his desire to share it. Adam and Eve were allowed by God to eat the fruit from this Tree of Life. It represented a continuous, unbroken relationship with their Creator. This access was a very precious and loving gift from God to them. The other special tree in the garden was quite different. It was called the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. This tree was unique, and God gave a very specific instruction concerning it. He clearly told Adam and Eve that they could freely eat fruit from any other tree in the vast garden. They had plenty of delicious choices for their food every day, but there was this one important exception that they absolutely had to remember. This particular tree and the rule about it served as a gentle test of their trust and obedience to God. God gave Adam and Eve a very clear and simple rule to follow. He said to them, "You are free to eat from any tree you find in the garden." Then he carefully added the important restriction, "But you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil." God also honestly told them what would happen if they chose to disobey his command. He warned them plainly, "For when you eat from it, you will certainly die." This death meant more than just their bodies stopping. It meant spiritual death, a separation from God's presence and their innocent state. One day, a new and unfamiliar voice spoke in the peaceful Garden of Eden. This voice belonged to a serpent. The Bible describes this serpent as being very clever and extremely sneaky. It was more cunning and crafty than any other wild animal that God had made. This serpent was not a friend to Adam and Eve, it was an enemy. It wanted to trick them. Its goal was to make them disobey God's single command. The serpent decided to approach Eve first, perhaps seeing her as more receptive. It was a beautiful creature to look at, but it carried bad intentions in its heart. The serpent came close to Eve. It asked her a sly and misleading question. "Did God really say," the serpent hissed, "you must not eat from any tree in the garden at all?" This was not exactly what God had told them. The serpent was deliberately trying to twist God's words. It wanted to make God's simple rule sound unfair and overly restrictive. Eve, to her credit, initially corrected the serpent. She explained God's command accurately. She said they could eat from other trees, just not the special one in the middle of the garden. She clearly knew the rule. The serpent, however, was determined to deceive. It boldly told Eve, "You will not certainly die." This was a direct and outright lie, contradicting God's explicit warning. Then the serpent added another tempting lie to its argument. "God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened." It whispered persuasively. It continued its deception. "And you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve listened carefully to the serpent's smooth and tempting words. A seed of doubt about God's goodness began to grow in her mind. Eve looked intently at the fruit on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It looked very tasty and appealing. The color was rich and it seemed beautiful to look at, and the serpent had promised that it would make her wise like God. She deeply desired that special wisdom, so Eve made a choice. She reached out, took some of the forbidden fruit, and then she ate it. After she had eaten, she gave some of the fruit to Adam, who was there with her. Adam also chose to eat the fruit. They both knowingly disobeyed God's one clear command. Immediately after Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, everything changed drastically. Their eyes were indeed opened, just as the cunning serpent had said they would be, but it was not a pleasant or empowering experience. They suddenly saw that they were naked. For the very first time in their lives, they felt a strong sense of shame and embarrassment. They had never experienced this negative feeling before. Quickly, they gathered large fig leaves from a nearby tree. They tried to sew them together to make some simple coverings for themselves. Their precious innocence was lost forever in that moment. Later that same day, Adam and Eve heard the familiar sound of God walking in the garden. This was usually a time they looked forward to, a time of fellowship. But this time they felt consumed by fear and guilt. They tried to hide themselves from God's presence among the thick trees of the garden. God called out to Adam, his voice gentle but firm, "Where are you?" God, in his wisdom, already knew what they had done. He wanted them to confess their actions. Adam finally answered, admitting that he hid because he was naked and afraid. God then asked them directly if they had eaten the fruit from the tree he had forbidden. Adam, instead of taking responsibility, blamed Eve for giving the fruit to him. When God asked Eve, she, in turn, blamed the serpent for tricking her. No one wanted to accept full responsibility for their choice. God then explained the serious consequences of their disobedience. The serpent was cursed above all animals. Eve would experience pain in childbirth and be subject to her husband. Adam would have to work very hard, toiling the ground for food. The ground itself was cursed and would now produce thorns and thistles. Life would become very difficult for them. Finally, God said that Adam and Eve could no longer live in the beautiful and perfect Garden of Eden. He lovingly but firmly sent them out from that paradise. This was a sorrowful but necessary action to prevent them from eating from the tree of life and living forever in their newly sinful and separated state. God placed a mighty angel, a cherubim, with a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the path to the tree of life. Their perfect life was over. This important story teaches us profound lessons about choices, the importance of obedience, and how sin first entered the world, bringing with it suffering, hardship, and separation from God.